InSafe, InHope, and the network of European Safe Internet Centers. I would like to welcome you for this one-hour workshop session titled Beyond the Tipping Point, Safe Internet Day in the Global South. And I would like to explicitly add that we have been in the very fortunate position to co-organize this workshop with our colleagues from CGI Brazil in general and SafeNet Brazil in particular. You will hear more about the important work that they do in this area of work later on in this session. I will quickly say something about the structure and the format of this panel. So it basically consists of two parts. In the first part, it will be us, the people sitting in front, talking. And we have a couple of speakers, and one of them is also joining remotely. So we have Larry Madgett, CEO of connectsafely.org and founder of safekids.com, who will bring a US perspective to the discussion. And next to me is sitting Rodrigo Naim, Education and Awareness Director of SafeNet Brazil, and he will bring in a local Brazilian perspective. In keeping up with the multi-stakeholder approach we try to follow at the Internet Governance Forum, we've invited a couple of other types of representatives. So Marco Pancini from Google, from the Brussels office, will probably be joining us as well, but as you may have noticed, he's quite busy across panels, so we hope he's still able to join us. And apart from that, we've also tried to have some youth representational involvement, although you know that the definition of youth is quite broad, and they're a bit older than you would typically expect, so we have two different profiles in our sessions. On the one hand, we have Marielle from Mexico, who's 25 years old, I think. And I think she's more in a position where she's looking at what she could do around some of these areas of work from a more professional point of view. And at the same time, we have Marina, who's a bit younger and a bit newer to the discussions. And she will also bring in her perspective, partly also based on her participation in the youth program, which has been organized also in collaboration with SafeNet Brazil. And finally, we also have Raquel from ISOC. So again, she can bring in a bit more of an international civil society linked to ISOC perspective. So before we start, I will give a quick introduction about who we are, what Safe Internet Day is, and why we are doing this workshop. I could speak for a very long time if my slider could work. Can you go to the next slide? Okay. So InSafe is a network of safe internet centers which has been initiated by the European Commission more than 10 years ago now. And each safe internet center consists of different components. So we have awareness centers who focus on the organization, implementation of educational programs and awareness-raising campaigns with a focus on online safety issues. We also provide a range of helpline counseling services, and we also collaborate very closely with youth representatives to bring in a younger voice and also to make sure that the kind of activities and the campaigns we are delivering are in tune with the expectations, the knowledge, the understanding that they have of a safe and responsible use of online technology. And at the same time, in trying to implement the European Commission's Better Internet for Kids agenda, we closely collaborate with InHope, the International Association of Internet Hotlines, and they more have a focus on eradicating illegal content from the internet. So in each safe internet center, there also is a hotline component. And together, we have across Europe a range of safe internet centers who try to promote a safer and a better internet. We have been doing this for quite a while now, and if you want to learn more about the work we do, because I said I could talk for quite a while there, perhaps have a look at the website, which you actually see on the screen behind me. So we have launched recently a Better Internet for Kids portal at betterinternetforkids.eu, and here you will find a variety of resources, information, services, guidelines as provided by the safe internet centers we have as a network across Europe. I think it's important to note that a lot of the activities we do are initially initiated within a European context, but obviously the internet has no European boundaries, also because a lot of the tools and the services we use are actually not coming from a European environment, even if obviously the European Commission would very much want that we are a strong player in this regard as well. And we have one particular successful campaign, Safe Internet Day, which again we have launched a while ago and which gradually has been going beyond what we are doing within Europe. So therefore, in 2009, we have actually initiated the concept of Safe Internet Day committees, and they basically complement what we are doing within Europe. So they participate in our annual campaign, something we do every year in February, and they help us to reach out beyond Europe and to help implementing some of the better, safer internet messages which we have in place. I think it's important to note that a lot of this actually links to some of the more general discussions which we've been having here at the Internet Governance Forum. So there's a lot of talk about connecting the next billion. Recently there have been a couple of papers which have been published. Just to give one example, there has been a 1 in 3 paper which has been produced by Sonja Livingstone, Jasmina Byrne from UNICEF. Sonja Livingstone is from EU Kids Online. But also John Carr, who you have probably heard on a couple of panels in the Internet Governance Forum. And they specifically talk on the one hand on the fact that a lot of internet users are of an age lower than 18 years old. But they also point to the fact that if you look at the future of the internet and these connected users, that a lot of them are actually not within the northern part of the world, but a lot of this is happening in the global south. I think we as a network of European centers, we have sort of a willingness and an openness to help to externalize our agenda, our activities, but at the same time we're also very modest and we are very, we fully understand that it's a bit of a tricky issue in the sense that a lot of the awareness raising messages that we focus on, that they may well have a different type of meaning in different contexts. So that's also why we have set up the workshop as we have done. We're not going to talk that much about European activities, but rather we have tried to involve some speakers who can bring in a more global perspective. And you could actually say that both the US case and also the Brazilian case, that it's good examples of exporting the product, but also giving it a bit of a different meaning, a different interpretation, and also very much closely working with people on the ground locally. Because again, we realized to make this a success, we need to have a thorough understanding of what is really happening at the local level. And I think the best people to do that is by working with civil society, but also different partners on the ground across the world. So I will give the word to first Larry, who will be connecting remotely, and then to Rodrigo, who will talk a bit more about Safe Internet Day, the history behind it, and future plans within Brazil. And then afterwards, we will give the word to some other people, and we will gradually go into more of a workshop approach. And actually I want to emphasize that this is sort of not just a starting point, but also not an end. So we've initiated this line of work a while ago. So we had 2 weeks ago a Safe Internet Forum in Europe, where we brought together European stakeholders, and we started campaigning for Safe Internet. And now we're actually picking up this work, and you may have seen that we've been quite active at our InSafe InHope information stand with the Polaroid campaign during the event. And there again, the whole idea is to look at who's active in this area of work across the world and try to involve them, set up Safe Internet Day committees, set up collaborations, partnerships. And in a way you could say that Safe Internet Day is a bit of an excuse to open the debate and to look at how this can be used in a positive way to further the discussion in other countries. But I'll give the word to Larry. So Larry is, as I've mentioned before, CEO of connectsafely.org, and they have done some very successful things in the past, and then gradually we move to the south. And Larry didn't send a PowerPoint presentation, but he gave us a slide, and I'll leave it actually up to Larry to tell a bit more why he has given us this particular picture, and he can also talk a bit more about the origins of Safe Internet Day in a US perspective. So Larry, I hope you've heard us, and then perhaps we can now give the word to you.
Okay,
Hi, Larry.
Hans, thank you very much, and I want to say hello to all my friends in the room. I know that David Wright from the Safer Internet UK is there, and I'm assuming that there are many folks. So this is the first Internet Governance Forum that I have not been able to attend in person in the last few years, and I'm glad I'm at least able to attend remotely. I want to apologize for having the telephone in my hand. I had this very expensive microphone issued to me by CP, which is America's largest radio network, but for some reason it's not working, which is typical of technology. It often isn't quite there when you want it, but also like technology, there are workarounds. So that old phone system that's been here for nearly 100 years has come to the rescue today. Safer Internet Day, as many of you know, I'm sure most of you know, was begun in Europe about 12 or 13 years ago. Hans can probably give you the exact date. And as you know, InSafe creates it, and the European Commission is very much involved, and it's a big deal in Europe. It was not such a big deal in the United States. There was a small NGO in the U.S. that was running it, but apparently they hadn't done much. So about 2 years ago, now maybe getting close to 3, we got a call from Janice Richardson, who I think preceded Hans in the position that he is in now in terms of running Safer Internet Day, and asked if we, and by we I mean connectsafely.org, would be interested in coordinating it in the U.S. And just as a bit of background, connectsafety.org is a 10-year-old NGO that we started back in around 2005 during the period when MySpace, you remember MySpace, was first emerging as a major social networking platform. And there was a great deal of consternation, of concern in the U.S. and around the world about children being endangered by social media. And in fact, the attorneys general for most of the states in the United States, even the top law enforcement officials of many of our states, were on television almost daily worrying about predators online and children being sexually abused, and it just went on and on and on. And we realized that social media was here to stay. We knew that it had a positive potential, and we also knew that even though children were being endangered, there were some cases where children had been harmed and endangered. For the most part, that just simply wasn't true, that the vast majority of children back then and, of course, today were not in serious harm or danger as a result of their social media participation. So we created the first internet safety organization aimed at the social media generation, aimed at the Web 2.0 world, because all of the other internet safety organizations really got their starts, at least at that point, back in the Web 1.0 world, where children were simply consumers of content, and now, of course, children are creators. That's how we began, and we began as a fact research-based organization. So if you go to connectsafely.org and you click on tips and advice or parent and educator guides, you'll see a lot of tips and a lot of articles and a lot of advice, and in almost every case they're based on actual research. For example, I'm glad you mentioned the paper that Sonia Livingston, Jasmine Byrne, and John Carr wrote about children's rights, and that's an example where we took that paper, and if you go to connectsafely.org, you'll see on the front page we not only described that paper, but took it a step further. Because part of what we're about is not simply child protection, but also empowering children. And we really mean that. Sometimes when people talk about empowering children and they point to the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, they say that, but then they talk about protecting children, monitoring children, controlling children, limiting children, filtering children. We believe that by empowering children, especially teenagers, older children, that means giving them a voice. That means allowing them to use social media. It also means allowing them to use social media in public spaces. So, for example, in our interpretation of the paper that Hans mentioned, we get specific and talk about how children under the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child and under certainly the Constitution of the United States and many other countries have the right of free speech, and that includes the right to use social media. So we're very specific on that and feel very strongly that children should be given rights and have a right to demand full participation, not only in forums like the Internet Government Forum, but through social media so that they can organize on their own behalf and espouse their own beliefs. Anyway, getting back to Safer Internet Day, when Janice asked us if we would take over in the U.S., we were, of course, honored and thrilled to be working with such a great international consortium of organizations. It's unusual here in the U.S. for us to pick up on something that was started in Europe, but when the Europeans do something that's exceptionally excellent, as this was, we were very, very happy to do our part here in this country. So we held an event on the first of our Safer Internet Days, which was 2014, in Washington, D.C., and we had some great panels. We had young people, a panel of young people moderated by an adult journalist that talked about children's involvements and children's rights and teens, talked a lot about cyberbullying, and talked about how many teens were really on top of this and were exerting leadership as peers to help their peers understand and deal with and really limit and then recover from some of the negative things that were happening in the Internet. And then we had another panel of industry leaders, and this panel was moderated by a teenager, by a 17-year-old high school student. And so we really wanted to make it a kind of cross-generational project. We were very honored that year to have our keynote speaker being Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, who is a very important senator in the United States. I think at the time he was the second highest ranked senator in the United States, very famous, very important, and it was great to have his participation. The following year, we held Safer Internet Day clear across the country in Washington, D.C. This was February 10th, 2014. So I guess the first one was 2013. Now we're in 2014, and we had Facebook, and we had, again, some great panels. It was very, very youth-dominated. We actually brought in more than 200 young people from schools in California. We bussed them in, and some of them came from schools as far as 80 miles away. That would be about 150 kilometers for the rest of you. Others came from the area, and by area, if you've ever been to Facebook, if you ever have the opportunity to visit Facebook, you'll notice that they're in an area called East Park. And even though the U.S. is a very wealthy nation, East Menlo Park is a very, very poor community. So we had a great deal of diversity at our event, both in terms of ethnic and socioeconomic participation, representing not just the America that's excellent, but the America that's struggling. And as you know, there are Americans who do struggle. So we had a great event there, and our California, and is also running for the U.S. Senate in California, and Sheryl Sandberg, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Facebook. And Sheryl is also the author of Lean In and has taken a very strong leadership role globally in terms of empowering women and girls. So she gave a great presentation, while Kamala Harris gave a great presentation about a number of issues, including revenge porn, because as she had just prosecuted a case where a person had profited by allowing others to upload pictures, mostly of their ex-girlfriends, in sexually compromising situations. And this person is now spending 18 years in jail as a result of his crimes. And Kamala Harris talked about her office's role in prosecuting that horrible crime. We also, again, in 2014, had some great panels, and again, had a number of young people on the stage. It was very much a youth-dominated or youth-oriented event, and it was a great time. So fast forward to 2015, where we are now, and we are at the early stages of working on our campaign or our program for this year. I'm not 100% sure because I can't see the slide, but I think you have a slide of the Globe Theater. The Globe Theater is an auditorium at Universal Studios Hollywood, and I'm sure many of you have heard of Universal Pictures. It's a major movie studio. I'm not sure that's this slide, but I'll just talk this as well anyway. Universal Studios is a very important venue in Southern California, in Los Angeles. It's kind of like Disneyland. Oh, I see that slide. There's us and Sheryl and Kamala Harris up there right now. I can see that slide. But anyway, Universal Studios is a great place. There it is. I think we just saw it a second ago and it went away. It's a very important, I guess I'd call it an amusement park, theme park in Los Angeles, where thousands of people come every day to enjoy rides and other activities. So it's a great place to invite young people. Young people love Universal Studios, and that's going to be the venue this year. Now, because we're having it in Hollywood and at Universal Studios, we are going for more of a creativity/entertainment theme. And we can't announce any speakers yet. We really have not got those secured. But we are going to have people from the entertainment industry, not simply movie stars because they're famous, but people who have things to say about what it's like to be creative, how you can make an impact. We're going to have people who have done some amazing things on YouTube and other media, as well as probably somebody from the world of Hollywood, of maybe a famous actor, I'm not sure. But the point being that this year we're focusing more on the creative side, because we really believe that that's also important in Safer Internet Day, to talk about how you can make a contribution, how you can put yourself out there, how you can safely be a public persona on the Internet. There is this notion the only way to protect your privacy and safety and security is to hide, is to not be out there. But the reality is that many, many young people are doing incredible things online and making a huge contribution, and being public citizens, being spokespeople for their causes, whether it's a political message or a social message, or whether it's combating racism or combating poverty or improving the climate or fighting cyberbullying. There are thousands, if not millions, of people who are taking an active role online. Many are using creative tools like YouTube to get their messages across. We want to celebrate that and, of course, talk about how it can be done safely. But we strongly believe that having a strong public presence is actually not only empowering, but creates a sense of safety, because it allows you to control your message. If I have no presence on Google, for example, and you put something nasty about me, that's what's going to come up if somebody searches on me. If I have a big public presence, then maybe your nastiness can be way below all the positive things that I've posted, that I've done. So we want to emphasize that. We're very pleased to have a number of great corporate partners, including Google and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Ask.fm and Yahoo and several others. And we're equally pleased to have a number of NGOs that we work with, including the Family Online Safety Institute, the National Parent Teachers Association, and a number of other important national organizations, Common Sense Media, Internet Education Foundation, I Keep Safe. So this is very much of a coalition. Our role is to put together, but we are really conveners of what we consider to be a very important day. And I think as everybody knows, and you'll probably talk about later, it is simply one day. The reality is that every day needs to be Safer Internet Day. We need to constantly be talking about how we can use this powering technology in ways that are rewarding and enhancing and make people feel better about themselves and each other. So with that, I will shut up and leave it for Hans to take over the program.
Okay. Thank you very much, Larry. I think that's very helpful also in making it more concrete from the audience point of view of the kind of activities we try to do. We look forward to seeing you again and keeping in touch, and I'll give the word now to Rodrigo, who can give a Brazilian perspective, a bit from a similar but yet different point of view.
So, thank you very much, Hans, and as a Brazilian, I really want to welcome everyone. The last day of IGF this year, but it's a really good pleasure to have all you here in Brazil. And for Brazil, and I talking from SaferNet perspective, but also I send a message from Thiago, my colleague, from the board of CGI, Brazilian Steering Committee of Internet, and just to share a little bit about our experience here. And we are really happy to hear from Larry about the big problem of thinking about protecting children, but nothing to do exactly with eliminating and limiting child rights. And SaferNet Brazil, just a short presentation, it's an NGO, Brazilian NGO that works with human rights online. We're supposed to start working with the Brazilian hotline, and the main issues were at the beginning at the Orkut, because in Brazil you must know that MySpace wasn't an issue in Brazil, but Orkut was the first really strong social network in Brazil, and at the time it was child online sexual exploitation, the main issues. But since the beginning, we have 10 years now this year, we are working at human rights online, and not only child online sexual exploitation. And for us, it's a really big pleasure to run Brazilian Safer Internet Committee. It starts in 2008 when, with Janice at the time, from Safe Network, invited SaferNet Brazil to start to organize the Safer Internet Brazil Committee to run these activities in Brazil, and it was exactly what we were already doing in Brazil. So it was a clear connection, and we were at the time in cooperation with CGI, Brazilian Steering Committee for Internet, that you must know very well now, and also the federal prosecutors, and at the time also the federal police was engaged at the repression level, but the Safer Internet Point was a nice connection, because we were already trying to engage law enforcement at the educational issues also. So in Brazil, since the first edition of Safer Internet Day in 2009, we started as a multi-stakeholder group. So we had the Brazilian Steering Committee of Internet, SaferNet as NGO, and law enforcement with the federal prosecutors, and also some companies as Google and other companies in Brazil that support the Brazilian Safer Internet Day. So I think it's a good case, because we start as a multi-stakeholder group, and as well we keep this idea, keep working in these issues. And as I said, just to inform that SaferNet Brazil is a kind different from the other Safer Internet centers in Europe, because we are just one organization running the Brazilian hotline for online human rights cybercrimes, but also the awareness node and the educational node, promoting a lot of different campaigns at national level and trying to support these issues. And so we have different kinds of approaches, not only child rights, but especially to child rights. We are doing this work, and also we are running the Brazilian helpline since 2012. So we are a kind of a Safer Internet center in just one organization, and we are also trying to build some data from our experience, even with the hotline reports, but also the helpline reports, and also some surveys. Before we have in Brazil the YouKids Online survey, we had in SaferNet some small surveys to know more about what children and adolescents were doing online. So I'm really happy to hear from Larry, because we are, since the beginning, we were inspired by the principles of internet governance and use made by CGI before our internet rights included at the Marco Civil that you heard about of these last days. So our starter point was the principles made by CGI and the child rights law that we have in Brazil, following the Convention of Child Rights. So it's really important to go beyond the moral panics that in every country, I suppose, that we have this kind of panic about child online protection, and we are trying to promote these activities as a media literacy activity, and trying to engage different stakeholders. And in Brazil especially, we are a big country, we are doing a lot of decentralized activities. And this is a good point, because in Safe Network and Hans and Janice always were really open to new activities, to new strategies, and Safer Internet Day just I start point to develop different activities, and we are glad to have different kinds of activities in Brazil in this perspective. So we have police officers doing some awareness seminars, we have prosecutors going to schools, we have a federal police operation, they call that educational operation, that they went to schools and at the epoch, the cyber coffees in Brazil was a big issue. They went just to talk with children, to talk with the owners of their house, and to educate. It was really pretty nice to have this engagement from the law enforcement perspective, but also schools. And we try to decentralize this kind of activities, building materials to everyone who wants to do something, could do something, even if they are not expert of child online protection. They can do something with the videos, the materials, and all the materials that we have developed in SaferNet Brazil. But we are also really happy to have these openings from InSafe Network to use the European material as the Web We Want material. They have both the educational material for teenagers, but also for educators. And we are using also this material made from InSafe Network and we are really glad to try to localize and be inspired by this kind of material. Even we built some mini games to use these materials. And another issue, I think it's really nice for these who want really to start to doing Safer Internet Day. I see many known faces here in the room. I know that much of you are doing already a lot of things before, but everywhere we have this press importance. So we try to engage the press, and we have really good success in Brazil, making some important documents and some insertions really interesting at the press. It's a big one. This year we had a session with CGI. It's really interesting because we had the Brazilian Minister of Human Rights participating at this meeting. This room that you can see at the bottom left, the bottom left was at CGI office in São Paulo, and we were with the Google representatives, Twitter representatives, we were the Minister of Human Rights, and also some other partners, and with an online hub with the ICANN connection, because we had a lot of CGI board members at the ICANN meeting, and they were online discussing that, and it was a really nice repercussion of that. We have, as I said, a really strong multi-stakeholder group, and we are trying to engage also universities, schools, but also other NGOs, and I suppose that it's really interesting because in such big country we need a lot of partners. And I want to enforce that we have a lot of young and adolescents doing the Safer Internet Day in their own community, and we are trying to engage much more youth and adolescents, not as a public of the activity, but as the major actor of the activity they are doing. Yesterday I was with some youth groups here in Paraíba, and they are doing themselves their own workshops and trying to include child online protection and child rights on the normal activity. So just to see the main partners for Brazilian Safer Internet Committee, we have, as I said, CGI and SaferNet, but also the prosecutors, UNICEF are joining us, the Human Rights Ministry, Google, and GVT is now a Telefonica company, telecom company that are also supporting these activities. So just to finish, I really want to share that it's a big challenge. The date itself, it's always our carnival, or 1 week before or just 1 week after the carnival. And so to engage people at the Brazilian carnival, I assure you that it's not easy. And even the schools are at the vacations. The federal prosecutors and law enforcement have a recession period, and so it's really hard work. But we still use the more than 100 countries at the same time use the data, but we also develop the month of Safer Internet as an important point, especially for the press. I think the press love it when they said that there are a lot of activities all around the world, but also we are developing some data from our organization to launch at the Safer Internet Day as a main discussion. So I just want to come back with this kind of concern that I have even in this IGF, when we are still in some cases focused on protection and focus on exploitation and violence. It's really important, but I reinforce that for us in these 10 years it's not a lot, but we are convinced that media literacy is the issue. We have to include child online protection at the media literacy at general, and not only trying to protect from the danger, but empowering and also learning the child rights perspective in broad sense, like as if you, we are not talking about anymore protecting them from strangers, but how to talk to strangers. How can I enjoy a strange conversation in an online game or even anywhere? So how to have the tools, but also the principles. And I come back to the principles that are included in our Marco Civil, and we have a new article in Marco Civil that include the obligation of the state to educate for a safer and educating the cyber citizenship perspective. And I think this is a big issue, and we are really happy to do that in Brazil. So we are really happy to have the new portal of Safer Internet Day, much better clean and help us to organize these activities. And well, feel free if you need or want any material from SaferNet. And just to finish it before passing the word to the youth groups, I remember the Safer Internet Day, I don't remember exactly if it was in 2011, that the theme was connecting generations. And we did a really good sessions at the Federal Prosecutor's offices. And just we have different generations, you know, the grandmother and the mother and the sons, and a guy with 9 years old that have a blog. They were writing in her blog, and the discussions were really inspiring. And I think that this theme is a continuous theme. How we can connect generation in creating new activities to talk about safer internet. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've now heard a couple of more concrete examples of how we try to implement Safer Internet Day globally. I think Carnival is an excellent metaphor for the challenges we sometimes face as a global network, because you initiate something at one place and then you encounter challenges, difficulties which you didn't necessarily expect in advance. But I think that's also the beauty of how the campaign is set up, in the sense that in a way we try to coordinate, initiate, streamline, but then it really goes beyond our control and a lot of different things are happening. And we try to be as inclusive as possible. And in line with this, and that's also the thing we're going to do in the final part, and I know we're running a bit short on time, we really try to involve as many as different people as possible. And that's also what we now would like to do very, very quickly before having a bit of a final discussion opportunity. Listen at some of the different stakeholders, different voices. So maybe we can start with Marco to give a very brief contribution from Google, just saying what Safe Internet Day is for you, and then maybe we can go to Internet Society, and then to end with the most important people, the young people, because obviously that's the target group. But Marco, very, very briefly.
Thank you, Hans. So for Europe, I think that our experience was in the last year really to try to bring on board as much as we could all the industry players and all the civil society groups on some very clear messages. I think we focus a lot and in a very successful way recently on media literacy, because we understood that we identified this as a concrete area where the industry could also work together with the other stakeholders in order to provide some meaningful content. We provided very good materials, in my opinion. One example for all is the digital skills manual that we prepared together with the European Schoolnet, that was developed and given on the school, the web, it's called The Web We Want, is available online. I strongly encourage all of you to have a look at that. This was an attempt to not just create awareness around safety, but really make sure that these guidelines are entering into the school and are starting to be part of the curricula of students. We are still working a lot on the event, on the Safer Internet Day. I think there are a lot of room for improvement from this point of view, especially for what concerns Brussels. In member states is much more lively because of the direct impact that the activities that you do in the countries has on real people. Sometimes in Brussels we have this connection between the real world and the policy world, so it's a little bit more complicated, but I think we are really making, the progress that we are making there is to make sure that the different initiatives in the member states are also put in the context of the debating process with the policymakers. I think, especially for next year, that is going to be extremely relevant because there are some specific discussion happening in the Commission and in the Parliament around what's next in terms of what rules of the Internet for kids, so for kids' safety and family safety. So I think next year is going to be even more relevant from this point of view.
Okay, Thank you. And maybe to go from then industry and more the European focus to a more global focus. And I can immediately say for us one of the big successes of being here at the Internet Governance Forum with our information booth is having also the opportunity to reach out, for example, to ISOC chapters and people who are locally active in regions where we don't necessarily have a big representation. So maybe from your perspective, what do you think you could contribute or continue to contribute to Safer Internet Day?
Thanks, Hans. So, as Hans was saying, I'm here more to exchange with you. For those that don't know, Internet Society is also an NGO with worldwide reach. We do have over 100 chapters spread around the world, which are local community members that discuss Internet issues, Internet governance, and the evolution. Internet Society was created as the umbrella for the IETF, which is the Internet Engineering Task Force, where the protocols and the standards for the Internet are created. But it evolved over time from this technical role to now a more discussion and, well, I'm not avoiding society, with the intersection of technology, development, and policy. So with this in mind, just to give some key messages and of what I'm hearing from this, the experience of the Safer Internet Day. First of all, on the technical perspective, most of the reactions on child safety are based on filtering, right? Technical filtering. And this brings a lot of risks from the fragmentation of the Internet, creating kind of networks that are not the Internet that we want and that it was created. So the key message is, don't take this Internet for granted. It was built under an open architecture, distributed and resilient, that we need to keep as a core principle, a core technical principle, and that sometimes is not into the discussions, and it needs to be remembered. Don't take the Internet for granted. Keep the core principles, keep the core Internet principles to keep it open and resilient and to keep evolving. Also, the final goal here is, in this discussion of child and Internet and keeping this safety, is to empower, and that I think I agree with all the speakers, to come from this point of protection and going forward to empower and make sure they can achieve and benefit from the full potential of the Internet, right? The Internet of opportunities. And for that, I would highlight two paths that we can also work on. The first one is also having them access to the Internet. Especially from developing countries, we have the issues of availability and affordability that needs to be also considered. It's not only having them safe, but also getting them there, and how they get there, and which are the devices, the opportunities that are available when they come in. It seems to be also like a second or parallel question, but it's really important. And the second one is trust. I know SAFE is under and the umbrella of trust. It could be a building block on the trust issue. But what I want to highlight, so on tackling the children itself, is first, when we talk about raising awareness on the trust issues, is not only on the children, but also on their environment. And their environment, by their environment, I mean the actors that are educating, so educators, teachers, also the parents and guardians. They are the ones who will build this environment of trust, and they also need to have the trust to move on and be a player in mobilizing children online and avoiding the risk of misbehavior or inappropriate use of the Internet. Also, on the legislation issues, I think it was mentioned a little bit, just to give this message that to avoid the over-regulation. When we think where there is a crime, of course, there are some undiscussed crimes that we need to take. But when we think about in this protection mindset that we need to regulate, we need to the behavior and the use of the internet, we need to be really careful, exactly to avoid that we are over-regulating, over-blocking, and censoring. And keep in mind also the use that they are doing and the freedom that they need to go over. So I hope I could change a little bit my presentation based on what I was hearing, but I hope I can give these key messages and bring new issues that you could use on the discussions, the technical core principles, and the access and trust issues. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So then, to conclude the first half, which is almost close to the end of the session, so we have two younger voices, so I wouldn't say young voices, but maybe we start with Marina, and it's really a quick question, like, who are you, what are you doing here, and you've heard a lot of things about Safe Internet Day, but
hi Jens, thank you. I'm Marina, I'm from Brazil, and I study computer science. And I want to say that some people have no idea about the risks of posting some kind of pictures and sharing privacy information. Actually, they like that. They love posting about their lifeline. And that's why we need to educate people in some way. But that don't mean that we must lose our core principles like universal access, freedom, diversity, net neutrality, and privacy. And by the way, these principles are from the Declaration of Youth from America Latina. And we can do that anyway. We need to empower young people to do that, because it's easier to young people to talk with young people. We need to create an equality environment, because we talk the same language, we use internet to the same issues. And we also post picture online and talk about how was our weekend and stuff. And also, we grown up using internet, so we live like this. Our whole life is doing that. And also, people think that internet is on Facebook, Twitter, and these apps. We can use internet too to get information, to bring up our education. And we need to engage them to know how large internet is and how better we can build it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then maybe, Marina, I'm going to ask, Marielle, sorry. I'm going to ask you a very specific question, also based on some of the conversations we've had before. Like, I would rather characterize you as a young professional who's also looking for opportunities to do some active work in this field. If you would have to come up with a recommendation of how you would organize a Safe Internet Day activity, or which kind of focus would you give to that? Could you perhaps give some ideas in that regard?
40 seconds for context, 40 seconds for 3 specific points to answer that. I was 10 when the computer arrived in my home, and I think since then, 15 years have passed. If I have spent 2 months in total without internet access, that's probably a lot. So I grew up with unrestricted screen time. I grew up with unrestricted internet access, like I have no adult surveillance. My mother didn't know what it was. And I saw the very worst of the internet, and I somehow survived by miracle. And the thing is, I also saw the very best. And I want other young people to not have to face the same that I did, which was free use, which I really enjoyed, but zero guidance on the most important technology that was shaping their growth in privacy and healthy relationships, and much more important things than technology. And that is why I'm sitting here, also thanks to a Youth at IGF program. If it weren't for that program, I wouldn't be here. But I would still be doing a Safer Internet Day activity next year in Mexico. And the answer to the question, I needed that context because I am close enough to remember what it was like to grow up and be interested in these issues, but not speak the language of the IGF. And now that I'm more on the professional side, I can understand why there is value in having an event format like this. But I can say if your target audience is youth, you need to have three considerations. The first one is you need to bet for interactive formats. And I don't mean that you do a presentation and then you do a discussion. That doesn't really work with youth. We need to find formats in which we can present information through interaction and through collective construction. And for that, because we don't have much time, I can just point to on-conference models. I think on-conference models have really achieved ways to present information interactively. Second, test your communications materials with young people, because sometimes we consider that something is clear in the pamphlet or in the call for applications or in the social media materials we use, but then a young person looks at it and it just doesn't resonate with them. So please do test your communications materials. And finally, make room for young people to do contributions, but don't really expect them. Why do I say this? In Youth at IGF, without the mentors necessarily working hard to make that happen, we saw an observatory arise and a declaration, and like young people actually took leadership, and that was amazing. But in some processes, that just doesn't happen, and it doesn't mean that young people are lazy or stupid or something. It just varies among communities. So make the room, but if it doesn't happen, don't sweat it. I mean, it will happen eventually, but it's important to give room, but also not have like super high expectations when you are trying to introduce a topic or a type of reflection that might be new to their experience, and just give them time, and I promise at least 10 years, 15 years later, it makes a difference.
Okay, thank you very much. We have 1 minute and 25 seconds left, and right after this session there is another session. So what I would like to do actually is perhaps invite David to quickly explain, like, this is sort of a starting point, so all our centers, but also the SID committees, they have national meetings where they bring together different stakeholders and they have a debate on how they could work. Perhaps David, can you quickly summarize how you do, and we hope that's perhaps also a model for those who want to become actively involved, and if you want to discuss further, just come to our information stand and you can ask any question you may have.
Okay, thank you, Hans. I'm David Wright from the UK Safer Internet Centre, and we've clearly heard now why all this is important, and I would just encourage everyone to think about the sorts of things that they could do. So whether that's on an individual level, if you publish articles on the day on February the 9th next year, if you work with groups of children, then running perhaps sessions with them. If you're an NGO, if you work for a company, then perhaps there's information you can get out to your customers, if you like, or to groups of children, or if you're indeed represent a country, then doing all sorts of different things. There's all sorts of activities that can do to promote the aspects of Safer Internet Day, which again clearly is on February the 9th. As Hans said, more information is at the booth that we have, and there's also some 3 questions that we can perhaps leave you with to think about how you might get involved, what you might like to do. Safer Internet Day, February the 9th.
Thank you very much. I think we're now running out of time, so we will close the session here. And again, we will be outside. If you have further questions, just come here to ask. So we have a couple of representatives from the centers, but also from the SID committees and also some younger people who are involved in the activities we do. So that's it.